Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio,
your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, what exactly have they been focused on? Bob Iger says that they're going to focus on creativity as he returns to run the show at Disney. Shouldn't they been doing that all along, or haven't they been doing that all along? I don't know. We'll talk about it. Of course, that's one of the big stories floating around conversation of all things Star Wars. Of course, you have to look at the parent company at Disney, and we know what a pivotal role Bob Iger played in the acquisition of Lucasfilm and the subsequent development and production of the sequel trilogy, and really everything leading up to, at least just the last year or so of the content flowing out of Lucasfilm. So we'll be talking about that. Great to have you with us here. We're back on Rebel Force Radio, the flagship show of RFR. Andor is over, but that doesn't mean that the conversation has to end. No way. We've got more coming up here. Tony Gilroy. It's been great because this is sort of like a little showrunner commentary track that has been sort of running through the media as Tony Gilroy has been very strategically doing these interviews as various episodes drop. So, he's not out there spoiling anything for anybody. So that's kind of cool. So he'll be talking about the final 3 episodes of season 1. And, we got Star Wars and pop culture, but really the big thing, the milk at the back of the store this week, ladies and gentlemen, is a world premiere of a brand new song from Puppet Lando. Yeah, Christmas is coming early here this week on Rebel Force Radio. Brand new song titled, Hello, What Have We Here? Oh, yeah, I know it writes itself when you think about it, really. But that's coming up later on. You don't want to miss it, and you don't want to miss this guy, that's for sure. You know him. That's my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Hello, what have we here? Oh, man, so exciting to know we have fresh Puppet Lando music to enthrall you and set the mood for a very romantic holiday. Throw away your Barry White records. You don't need them anymore. We got Puppet Lando for you to spin on the turntable so you get comfortable with your loved one.
I'd love to spend Christmas Eve with Puppet Lando. I picture him wearing kind of a velvet red hat, mm-hmm. and like a smoking jacket.
Very sexy Christmas with the felt that needs to be felt.
That's right.
Puppet Lando.
Right.
So, that's going to be a lot of fun. So we have that coming up later in the show. We have Fallout from Andor, all kind of interesting info revealed about the last 3 episodes that wrapped up season 1. We have highlights from Tony Gilroy, as Jason was saying. I think it's pretty insightful stuff. Yeah, I got to thinking. I was like, wow, Gilroy is just really not holding back. You can probably ask this guy any question you want, and he's not going to play games with you with mystery boxes and all kind of stuff like that. It's really straightforward storytelling, and what we saw on the screen is really the story. It's all right there. It's all happening right in the screen. There's really nothing else to consider than what's happening to these characters in these situations. And so Gilroy is so forthright with what inspired a lot of his decisions, different directions he could have taken the series and stuff. And so I've been studying a lot of his interviews and stuff in the wake of the season finale. And I was thinking to myself, this is the polar opposite of the reaction I had to Rian Johnson's media tour following the release of The Last Jedi, where I just felt like every time Rian would open his mouth, he was just making things worse. And
I think you dubbed it the apology tour at one point.
The apology tour, the explanation tour, I think I called it. It didn't sit well with me. I felt like he was planting too many thoughts in our head when we should be interpreting what went down in that film as fans and not have our hands held for it. And I don't get this feeling at all from Gilroy. I don't think he's holding our hands. He's just straightforwardly answering questions, providing insight to a lot of the decisions he was making as a filmmaker for this season of Andor, and doing it in such a refreshing, just straightforward way, which I think very much resembles his writing style to begin with. So he's a really interesting dude, and I get very little pretense or BS coming off of Tony Gilroy, which I enjoy very much. So we'll have some highlights, hear from him a little later, along with more information about that F-bomb that we reported here on Rebel Force Radio that was going to be featured in the season finale of Andor, and it never happened. Or did it? We have F the Empire updates coming later in the show.
I wanted to, Jim, get your take on something that I came across this today, and it's a piece in the LA Times. And it's sort of a printed roundtable discussion about Andor. And the headline is, "There were no Jedi and other reasons Andor was great." And so and this has been kind of on my mind as we've been doing these Andor, the after shows, is that I have this feeling that some of the wrong takeaways are being had with the Andor is the greatest Star Wars story ever told crowd. And that is a group out there. I mean, there's the people, this is the best Star Wars ever,
I've seen the headlines.
Absolutely. And it's sort of typified, I think, with these panelists. They're Times writers Tracy Brown, Matt Pierce, and Jameel Smith. So they sit down, they talk about why the first season of Andor was so great. And I just want to read you one quote here. This is from Jameel. He said, he's talking about the characters in the series. He says, "Indeed, none of them were pleading for help from the magical space wizards with the lightsabers, especially in the wake of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which had the Force coming out of its pores. It was nice to see something about the actual wars in the stars. I wonder sometimes what I would have thought of the original trilogy had I not seen it all before I was 8 years old. At that age, I was begging my father to make me a real lightsaber with the genuine expectation that was something that could happen. I was obsessed with the Jedi part of the story, and now as an adult, I see them as an albatross. Disney in particular, Disney in particular has oversaturated the Jedi storyline. 5 new movies, they still made it all about the Skywalkers and the Palpatines." And then here comes the other panelist, Tracy. She says, "Well, this is why The Last Jedi and Rogue One are arguably the best Star Wars movies post-Disney acquisition. I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. We can't all be chosen ones, and we shouldn't only tell chosen one stories." So there's two problems that I have with this. The first is that the Jedi, they call them an albatross. I mean, this is something that, they say the expression is an albatross around your neck, something that weighs you down, something that, it's comes from a poem where they talk about it. It's actually
The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
What's that?
The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Is that the name of the poem?
I do know.
Wow, man. Eighth grade English. Yes. But the idea was that it was a punishment for the fisherman that killed the albatross bird. He had to wear the carcass around his neck. So the Jedi are a carcass around the neck of what? I don't know. Star Wars, I suppose. So Here's my point. And I want to get your take on this. Is that I feel that the wrong takeaway here with how much we've really had a good time watching Andor is that, oh, this is what all Star Wars should be. We need to just get away from all of this mysticism and religion and mythology and just get down to the nitty gritty, because we can't all be Jedi. We can't all be chosen ones. So let's just set all that aside and get down to the nitty gritty. And I think that's dangerous. I think that is absolutely the wrong take with something like this. I mean, is there room for stories that don't necessarily focus around the Jedi? Absolutely. But even in this series, Jim, the shadow that is cast by what we know is fueling the Empire, the dark side. The shadow is there. Like you feel it. You feel the or see, I should say, the actual physical manifestation of all that darkness and that evil that is fueling the Empire. And so to say that all of that just gets in the way and that we need to move beyond that, I think it just typifies, I think, a viewpoint of some of these franchises where they want to strip away everything that makes it great, because either they don't get it, it makes them feel bad about themselves because they're uncomfortable with the notion of the ideal, ideal characters, ideal morals, ideal, whatever it is, they want to strip it all down and make it gray and ambiguous and squishy. And I just think that is absolutely the antithesis of Star Wars.
Okay, there's a few things to unpack here, and let me see if I can do that. Because I didn't hear this guy's take or read this guy's article until you just sprung it on me right now.
Right, this is
so
hot take.
My immediate response is, how do you say you loathe Star Wars without saying you loathe Star Wars, guy? Why do you want that stuff stripped away? Because you're basically stripping the Star Wars away from the Star Wars, the thing that makes Star Wars special in the first place. That's my original reaction. But then I really start to break it down. I start to think about it, and I open up my mind to what this guy is saying, and I think about it. And I think about the whole concept of the Jedi. And I've kind of come to this realization, the original trilogy isn't about the Jedi. It's not about the Jedi at all. We don't even know who the Jedi are in the original trilogy. All that stuff is like emerging information. We're sort of learning more about the Jedi as Luke learns more about the Force and he starts to learn more. We're really seeing that all through his eyes. But we have nothing to base it on. George Lucas stripped away the Jedi from that story. He really did. He left us with an old man who was once a Jedi and Yoda and Vader. And so, but all of this stuff emerges over time. And so we learn about what the Jedi was. And we had our preconceived notion of what the Jedi were and who they were and what they did at the conclusion of Return of the Jedi. But then 16 years later, George Lucas turned that all up on its head. And he made the Jedi something that a lot of people didn't ever consider them being. These space monks, So it was kind of interesting then. He really solidified what a Jedi is in those prequel trilogies. And we know the prequel trilogies weren't as well received as the original trilogy. Follow that up with the Clone Wars, which for the most part, mainstream audiences who go to all the Star Wars films, they might not really have any sort of working knowledge about the Clone Wars, never even watched an episode of it, what have you. So now we get to the sequel trilogy, where we have all this knowledge about what a Jedi is and what a Jedi does, but the characters on screen think it's a myth and a legend and not real. There's a lot of question marks about it. And the only guy who actually confirms that it is real is the guy from the original trilogy who didn't believe it at all during the original trilogy. It's kind of funny how that came full circle with Han Solo. But it's hard to bring really the sequels into this because they were just such a mishmash of ideas. So where are people developing this whole idea that Star Wars storytelling featuring Jedi is an albatross? Where does that happen? And I think it all goes back to that same old prequel trilogy hatred that was so prevalent amongst the smartest people in the room, the so-called smartest people in the room. And so they like it now when Star Wars is going to do something completely different. They loved The Last Jedi. And they feel the same way toward Andor. But for different reasons. They love The Last Jedi because it was turning a lot of things that we were assuming about Star Wars inside out. And then with Andor, they love it because it's basically just drama with a Star Wars skin on it. Or at least that's how they see it. Because it doesn't have the Jedi and the lightsabers. But I'm just curious as to when that became sort of like a common thing amongst a lot of critics. Star Wars featuring Jedi and lightsabers is a bad thing. And I think it really stems from the prequels. And now, we've also heard a lot of talk about why did the Solo film flop at the box office, things like that. And what was the thing that most people said? Star Wars fatigue.
Right, the timing. Yeah,
that came up a lot, and it still comes up today. Star Wars fatigue. And that was before all of these streaming services and stuff. I think that might be part of it as well. So this is kind of a difficult situation for the franchise in general, There's such a legacy to Star Wars that needs to be maintained. And you can do it in a couple of different ways. Some people say that alone is fan service, right? Mm. But I think maintaining the legacy is an important thing. But which legacy are you going to maintain? The original trilogy legacy, the sequel trilogy legacy, the prequels? Which legacy? Because they're all three are pretty vastly different, I think.
Yeah, I would push back a bit and say that I don't know. Now, yes, the anti-prequel sentiment that sort of runs through the veins of a lot of critics, even critics that were kids when those movies were coming out. Now a lot of them are professional writers and people that are commenting in this space. It may have something to do with it, but the movies that they cite here in this particular, or the stories that they cite in this piece, they talk about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, they talk about Rogue One, they talk about The Last Jedi, and they talk about the original trilogy. And they make a couple of points. One point is that, had I not seen it when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have liked lightsabers. I wouldn't have really been all that interested in the Jedi. It's like, okay, well, what would you have been interested in then? In a Star Wars movie.
That's a dumb take. Don't talk to me about Star Wars if that's the take you're going to go with.
Yeah,
don't even talk to me about Star Wars. You have just stripped any sort of credibility from the conversation if that's what you're going to lead with. Don't even talk to me.
Well, that's why I say, go watch Battlestar Galactica or Doctor Who or something. Then, if you just want to get your jollies in sci-fi and the like. But the other point that that's made by the other writer, which is I'll keep saying it, we can't all be chosen ones, and we shouldn't only tell chosen one stories. And that to me smacks a little bit of, part of the fun of being a fan when the original trilogy was coming out was the fact that you saw yourself as Luke Skywalker. I don't care what the prequels later came along and said about midichlorians or any of that. The fact is, I saw myself as Luke Skywalker, and then there were times when I was older and I saw myself as Han Solo. I mean, you see yourself in some of these different characters depending on what period of life you're in. George broke down all the characters in American Graffiti one time and said he was all of those characters at one point in his life. And I think that's what this type of storytelling does really, really well, is that it grows with you. And this idea that, well, I don't want to see movies about heroes because we can't all be heroes. Well, that smacks me as the people that, again, as I said earlier, they shy away from ever having to look at the ideals, ideal beauty, ideal heroism, ideal morality. It makes them uncomfortable. They're insecure about it. They don't want that mirror shining back at them, reflecting back at them, because they know that they don't measure up. Well, that's the idea of the ideal. It gives you something to strive for. It gives you something to motivate you. And so I think when you strip away that is the core of a story, not just Star Wars, but all, stories of heroism and heroics and what makes people do great, big, bold things. They become the chosen ones in their story. It's not just about, Joseph Campbell's chosen one. You become the chosen one in your story.
And the idea of chosen one, and again, a prequel notion. All right. There was no talk of a chosen one in the original trilogy.
Right.
That's true. All stemming from the prequels. So that kind of proves my point a little bit right there. But the tools used to tell the story about, making the character special, a chosen one, and presenting them with special powers and all of that stuff, that's just tools to tell a story. At the core of the story itself is a story about somebody, Luke Skywalker, somebody who wants to be something special, but he has to face these challenges along the way, getting stripped from the comfort of his home, living up to the challenges that are being presented in front of him, being told about his destiny and all of this stuff. Regular people get told this stuff all the time. In every household, every institution, wherever you go, there are standards and goals to acquire. Using all of the language of Star Wars and the special powers that these characters have, all of that is just to tell a story, because at the core of it is the universal story we all live, I think. The idea of having to do something and not really having the confidence, not really feeling sure, shying away from it. All of that stuff, you see this through all of these characters. And so it's more of a universal story about living up to your full potential that anybody can see and feel.
Well, you bring up a great point about the tools, because look, let's compare and contrast. Sure, Luke Skywalker has Force abilities. Luke Skywalker can wield a lightsaber. But look at the tools that Andor has. He's good with a blaster. He's good. He's a good pilot. He's got great street smarts. But at the core, it's about the choices that the characters make. Luke's abilities don't give him the courage to throw his lightsaber down and refuse to kill his own father. It's what's inside of him. It's his character that gives him that courage. It's Andor's character that gives him the courage to make the final sacrifice that he does in Rogue One. So you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, the tools are arbitrary. You're right. They're devices to tell the story. But what really matters are the characters' choices and how they are an extension of their character.
100% true, Jason. And I think some critics get a little confused because they want to see themselves represented on screen all the time.
Yes.
And what fun is that? That strips the fantasy away from everything and makes you a little self-centered, doesn't it?
Well,
it
insecure and self-centered,
doesn't it? I mean, because if I felt that way, I would never find any inspiration in the character of Leia Organa.
Right.
When I see her standing up to authority and standing her ground and things like that, that's going to inspire anyone. But right. I don't see myself on screen with the hair puffs and the sheet, sheet with a belt. That's not the point. It's more than what's on the surface. The surface can be very glittery and bright and awesome to look at, but what's underneath that surface? And that's the universal story that Lucas had created with that original trilogy, with that original film, that he spent a lot of time boiling down a history of storytelling. And he made it all, accessible for everyone. So
yeah, because it was.
But people don't understand that anymore. They're only seeing things on the surface now. And this review from whatever newspaper this is from. This sounds like to me a very surface level review.
Yeah, I mean the whole piece it's worth the read. It's over at the LA Times. Tracy Brown has got the byline on it, and they make some really good points. I mean, they definitely bring out some of the things that we love about the Andor series, but towards the end of it is when they start getting into this. This is better than anything we've seen before because it doesn't have all these trappings, this albatross of the Jedi. I was like, well, at the end of the day, this story would mean nothing if it wasn't for everything that we had that came before it.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't start the Star Wars saga with Andor. Couldn't happen. Not that I don't love Andor. We've all enjoyed it. And yeah, I like different flavors of ice cream, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's got to be ice cream.
It would be just another science fiction drama.
Yes.
That's all it would be.
Yes.
That's all it would be.
All right. Well, thanks for indulging me. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you got an opinion about it, shoot us an email, show@rebelforceradio.com.
I prefer our roundtables to these.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Jimmy. This is Rob from Denver. I'm a Patreon supporter and just love the community that you guys have built here and everything that you do for Star Wars fans. So I study and teach religious history here in Denver, and I'm calling because I wanted to make a comparison that I haven't heard yet from any of the YouTubers or Star Wars podcasts that are out there yet. And it relates to episode 11 of Andor with the idea of the dead of Ferrix becoming part of the stones that make up the town or make up the planet or the city or what have you. And I think you asked in the after show if anyone knew of any ancient civilizations or societies that did something similar to this by incorporating the people into the building materials of their city or town. And I think the answer is no, because in most places and times, people have tried to preserve the body as intact as possible, whether to preserve it for the afterlife or just to pay respects for the dead. But there is a text that I study called the Shepherd of Hermas. It's actually a Christian text from Rome in the late 1st or early 2nd century, not ultimately canonized in your Bible, but it was popular in the early church. And it includes the idea, which is entirely metaphorical in the book, that people become the stones that build a tower, which is itself the metaphor or a metaphor in that book for the church. So the people, if you are useful to the church over the course of your life, you become part of that tower. And it's kind of anonymous. You don't have a stone with your name on it or anything like that. But it also has the concept, much like Andor, of earning your place into the tower by a life of virtue and being useful to the church. As Marva said, she was glad to be worthy of the stone. So it's a really unique custom that the writers of Andor came up with for Ferrix, and it triggered my memory of The Shepherd of Hermas, a book that I've written about before. And although I doubt the Gilroys and whoever else wrote the show used The Shepherd of Hermas as a source, it triggered that memory for me. Thanks a lot, guys. Andor for me was a top-tier entry into the pantheon of Star Wars alongside the original trilogy and Rogue One for me, and the Timothy Zahn books, actually. It reminded me quite a lot of reading one of Tim Zahn's books. Methodical, detailed, but ultimately very satisfying. So I'm interested in your comments on any of this, the comparison that I made, and just sad that we have to wait so long for Season 2 of Andor. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Yeah, we did. We asked because this seems so unique, Jim, to us, this custom. It typified what I love so much about Star Wars, which is the world building and all these different civilizations and how, deep George would go to give us a sense of who these characters and who these beings were by giving us these context clues and things like that. It's funny. He says, "Well, I doubt that the Gilroys were aware of this particular book that he cites." Probably so, but what's interesting is that certain traditions, truths, ideas, they sort of seep through time and cultures and history, and whether you're consciously aware of it or not, they find a way of resurfacing. And it's just kind of interesting. You think about legends of, take something silly like Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot, the myth of Bigfoot pops up all over the globe in different cultures. And at times when it was impossible for these cultures to ever have any communications with one another. So there are these ideas, sort of these universal myths, truths, things that almost seem to be in the atmosphere, in the air. So again, whether they were consciously aware of it or not, it's a cool comparison.
Yes, extremely. And it just seems something so specific as far as the world building goes for Ferrix that I thought, wow, maybe with Gilroy being such a history buff, he pulled that out of some, I don't know, deep dive he was doing into some ancient society somewhere. And there was a lot of great stuff about it too, because at the end when Brasso is holding Marva's brick, she actually gets to be part of the action as he smacks a trooper upside the head with it.
Yeah.
That was just some real justice. Now, when they make the bricks, how was it explained? How do they make those bricks? Is it the ashes that are mixed in with the mortar and the stone, or
that's kind of what I assumed. I don't think they ever get into that sort of detail, and I don't know that there's anything visually or even in the dialogue that gives us any insight into how they're actually made. But that's what I assumed. I assumed that they were sort of ground up and made part of the mixture or whatever it is.
Oh no. It is. They do say that they mix the ashes with mortar and local stone dust.
They actually say this in the dialogue?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I put it in my notes from episode 11. That's the Ferrix custom. The dead are bricked to be thick as a brick.
Yeah.
As long as we're throwing down classic rock references, all I have to say is, all in all, you're just another brick in the wall.
That's
Pink Floyd.
That's
the one. That's the one. Boom.
All right. Well, thanks,
if you don't
Rob.
eat your meat, you can't have any pudding. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Think about it, kids.
Thanks, Rob. We appreciate it. If you want to hear yourself on RFR, you can leave us a voicemail at 708-320-1737, or just record your voicemail on your smartphone and send it to the show at rebelforceradio.com.
Hey, this is Dave Filoni, supervising director of Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts. In fact, the only podcast I listen to.
Rebel Force Radio!
If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. The Empire!
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, well, this is a follow-up to some rumors that we heard leading into the season finale of Andor. Jim, you had sort of warned a lot of the Rebel Force Radio listeners and said, hey, you know what? Put the Princess Leia earmuffs on. The kiddies is about to be a major... there's about to be an F-bomb dropped. Not a major bomb, an F-bomb dropped in the final episode of Andor, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And we had listeners saying, oh, yeah, I did the slow motion, and I was trying to look at, the actress's mouth and whether or not she, did she say fight? Did she say, F dash word? But we have confirmation via Deidre Miro actress Denise Goff.
Yeah, that's right, Jason. We got a hot tip about a week prior to the season finale that we're going to hear the first F-bomb ever dropped in Star Wars. And I thought, well, geez, this is probably what Gilroy was talking about in an interview I had heard from him earlier in the season, where he was talking about the first ever S-bomb dropped in Star Wars.
It's been so long since we put those episodes to bed And there's some other issues that came up later on that I'm not going to get into. But I forgot about that. And when Alex Fern said it last night in the show, I was like, oh, wow. We did say that. So
I'm guessing no pushback. We don't have to spend
not on that one, obviously. No. We have our relationship with Disney Plus has been, and we knew what the rules are along the way. There's one little point of controversy that we had later on, but in the end, I think it ended up the way it should be.
And I think that little bit of controversy later on that he's referring to is the F the Empire line from Marva. That clip was the first of 3 Tony Gilroy interviews hosted by Jeff Goldsmith on Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith. I recommend you check out those podcasts to hear the complete Tony Gilroy interviews. And so we had heard this about, maybe a week and a few days prior to the launch of the season finale. We had also heard with this scoop that we would see a post-credit sequence showing the Death Star. So we got one of 2. But when I heard Fiona Shaw as Marva say, "Fight the Empire," I'm like, well, there it is. That's got to be it. Fight the Empire. An overdub done in post-production to cover up the adult language. So I was looking real closely at her, trying to read the lips, Is she saying fight or is she saying the adult term in question? But I thought that was it. They must have got cold feet about that or what have you. And I figured we would get confirmation on this. And it happened real fast a week later. Yes, Empire Magazine and Denise Go, or you say Goff. Is it like Goff? Or is it Go?
Because I remember the great actor, the old gentleman that played Alfred the Butler in the Tim Burton Batman films. His name was Michael Go, or Gough. I always pronounced it Go, but I found out it was Goff pronounced.
Okay.
So I'm just
Goff,
going. I'm going with that.
Okay. Because I thought it was Denise Go. But Go, Goff, whatever. She is Dedra to me. Dedra Miro. And so
you're Dedra to me.
She's Dedra to me. She talks to Empire Magazine about her first day on the Ferric set. And her first day on the Ferric set was actually this final episode where they're having the funeral for Marva.
Amazing.
And she says, here's her description of what went down. Fiona's voice was all over us, except at the end, she didn't say fight the Empire. She said the Empire, which we were all really excited about. But we weren't allowed to keep it, obviously. Even behind the scenes, Andor wasn't your typical Star Wars show. That's what Empire says. But so there she's confirming that, yes, on the set, and as the dialogue was delivered from the page of script written by Tony Gilroy, it was F the Empire, and F did not stand for fight. But I think about it, is Fiona Shaw the person I want to hear drop the first F-bomb in Star Wars? I mean, she seems kind of like she had almost I don't want to say a regal quality to her, but she sort of carried herself as someone that,
Can I just say I don't want to hear my grandma dropping the F-bomb in Star Wars. She had sort of that grandmotherly vibe. To me.
That is undeniable. She did have sort of a granny vibe.
Yeah.
And, while it might be funny, I think a lot of us would laugh at that. And I think it would also diminish the impact of that eulogy she was giving for herself,
Yeah.
her that holographic speech. I think it would have been diminished by her dropping the F-bomb in there.
I agree.
And I don't think people would be talking about what she said in the hologram. I think they'd be talking about the F-bomb.
That's exactly right. That would have been the takeaway. That'd have been the headline. That's what everybody would have ran with. I don't need an F-bomb in Star Wars. I mean, I guess what I should say is I don't need it to be the lead of the story. If it happens and it takes us by surprise, you go, oh, wow, that was impactful. That was interesting. Great. Mm-hmm. but I don't need this buildup of, oh, there's going to finally be an F-bomb dropped in Star Wars.
Right.
Did you hear? And then, as you say, then all of a sudden that's what the focus and the attention on is. It's not the great dialogue. It's not the great performance. It's that there was an F-bomb.
When I heard the rumor, I thought for sure it was going to be Cassian Andor who says F the Empire. I could just picture him saying it. You know what? The Empire. I could just... He's got that... He has that grit,
Yeah. Okay.
He just has...
I'm good with that.
He would deliver that. I just think hearing it come out of Marvo's mouth would be just like... And that's the last thing we ever hear her say.
It just does diminish her character. You're right.
It diminishes it. Not saying that it wouldn't have worked if Cassian said it, because I think it would have worked. I'm glad they went the other way with this, because what she said was so impactful, and fight the Empire means
someone else that I wouldn't mind hearing drop it. If we're talking about here, I'm saying, I don't want to hear it, and then I'm like, what else would be kind of cool? Would be if I could see Mon Mothma in a heated one-on-one discussion. Not in public, just a heated one-on-one discussion. Maybe with that husband of hers.
Yeah.
And
you know what, Perrin? You know what I think, Perrin?
Yeah. He's like, but man, what about the Empire? You can't do this. What about the Empire? The Empire.
You know what? That'd probably get her locked up for good. The driver
probably
would go report.
Oh yeah, that driver of hers would have ratted her out.
I'm surprised that driver actually had to go and present the information to Blevin as verbally, as opposed to presenting him with a recording.
I also feel that's kind of high up. I mean, he's going right to Blevin. Doesn't Blevin have some stooges in the front office there that the driver, unless it must be a very covert operation.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to be. But you are right. Like, why does he have to meet him face to face?
Yeah, meeting him face to face is fine. I just thought maybe there would be some technology backing up his claims that Mon was saying this stuff about.
Oh, like he's got it recorded.
Gambler. Yeah. With the tech in Star Wars, it just seems like they should have a recording,
a hologram of the two of them,
word of mouth. Right.
And then he said.
So, but yeah, I'm just glad they didn't do the F the Empire, because it would almost have come away as something like, ooh, look what we did, or, and I sort of think we got that with Sergeant Mosk in that episode when he dropped the S-bomb, which was so unnecessary. It was really unnecessary. It was almost just like, can we get away with adult language in Star Wars?
Yeah.
And that's how it always comes across to me when they cross that line.
Well, they're doing that with all the new Star Trek series, aren't they?
Yes, I've noticed that.
Yeah. It's like, ooh, Picard said shit. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was watching a show and somebody said F you to Picard, and I couldn't believe it. So, yeah.
Mark the time. I dropped an S-bomb at 45 minutes in. But that's not the only thing that Denise Go or Goff reveals in this interview. It's a great interview, by the way. So check it out. She fully admits that she went into this pretty cold when it comes to Star Wars. It wasn't that she wasn't a fan. She just wasn't really exposed to it. And when Tony Gilroy said, well, it's not really my big thing, either, she thought, well, that's interesting. Let's go with that. And I don't always recommend that, and that's the thing that people go, oh, well, here's the formula. You got to get somebody that doesn't know anything about Star Wars. And that's not the point. You can be super talented as a writer, as a showrunner, as a world builder, not know anything about Star Wars and succeed very well. And then you can know everything there is about Star Wars and still fail, and vice versa. That's the whole point. It's the talent that's what matters. Sure, there are benefits with knowing the universe and all of that, but there can be some liabilities, too, with that. I mean, George himself, Jim, didn't we hear, he talked about being how some of the newer folks coming into Lucasfilm were too precious with the characters and the properties. That was his term. He wanted him to mix it up a little bit.
He first said that to Filoni during the Clone Wars when they blew up Jango Fett's helmet. Because it had always been assumed that Boba was wearing Jango's helmet, repainted, in Empire Strikes Back. And why did we feel that way? because George had him bump his head and dent the helmet.
Right.
In the same place where Boba's helmet is dented. And we thought, well, for sure, that's a continuity thing. And then George goes and blows that helmet up in the Clone Wars. And Filoni pushes back and says, hey, isn't this the one Boba's wearing? And George's response was, don't be so precious about all of this stuff. It's like, yeah, but you kind of set it up in Attack of the Clones when he got the dent on the helmet.
Yeah.
And the dent is very well known. There's an entire Boba Fett fan group known as the Dented Helmet.
Right.
That's the name of their fan group, and they've been around forever. So there's a certain amount of responsibility George has to take when he plants the seeds. He can't be like, oh, just don't, it's not so precious.
I always assumed that was an homage to the stormtrooper that bangs his head on the Falcon.
Well,
as opposed to that being the origin of the dent. Does the dent then show up later on in the film?
I think it does. All you have to do is Google Jango Fett Attack of the Clones.
I'm
Geonosis.
sure there's. Yeah, I'm sure there's.
It would have
reason.
to be Geonosis.
Yeah, right. Getting back to this Empire thing, this Empire Online interview, do recommend, check it out if you're a fan of the actress or the character. But they do talk a little bit about season 2 because they're filming right now. So with production now underway, quoting the article, Goff is more occupied grounding herself in the time-skipping structure. She says, I'm just getting my head around that and finding yet more sides of the character to explore. So we know that season 2, 12 episodes, 4 3-episode arcs, each arc representing a year in the timeline from the end of season 1 through what when we meet Andor in Rogue One. So each about a year of Andor's life. She says, what I'm really hoping for is Deidre out of uniform. She goes, I would look at Genevieve's costumes.
Who else wants to see that? Cyril Karn.
She talks in the interview about the character and the creep factor, with, she doesn't talk about the actor, being creepy, but that a lot of people point out that, he's kind of got this creep factor about him. And, she says the way she played wasn't that she was creeped out. It was that she's been so committed to her career that she's just never been intimate with anybody before. And so she was really just completely thrown off by this. She's never had time for that. She's never had any interest in that.
Oh God, I can already see where this is going. Just imagine the people who show up in your dorm building on freshman year of college, and they've never been away from home and away from their parents or anything.
Oh, right.
Those guys, they go nuts. They go nuts. So
it's like the Amish on Rom Springer. That's
yeah, right.
That's
there's
what
a perfect example. Yes, the Amish teens.
Oh, there's the dented helmet right there. Okay, so the dent. Yes, so the dent. Yeah, that's it. And here, I all these years, Jim, I thought it was just saying, "Oh yeah, the stormtroopers, they get it honest from Django. He hit his head going into the ship too." But it served a double purpose.
Have a double meaning. Double meaning. That's fine.
But anyway, so she says that still the notion of seeing Deidre in a new context, away from her pristine Imperial clothes. Part of her fear in Ferrix is that she's in her white coat being dragged along the floor. There's dirt everywhere. Said it's a fascinating one. Her uniform feels like her true skin. Who is she underneath that? We were talking about, would she even have jewelry? What would her hair do? She says there are still questions about Deidre to be answered. So sounds to me, Jim, like we're going to be, getting a lot more Deidre in season 2, and we're going to be seeing a lot different sides of her. That's a character that they really want to flesh out. I don't think you should be teasing that, talking about that if that wasn't something that we were going to see.
Let's get her out of those Imperial uniforms. And does she wear jewelry? Does she have a belly ring? These are the things I need to know.
We want to know.
Inquiring
we want to know. All right. Well, some of the things we want to know are going to come by way of Tony Gilroy. We've got some audio highlights of Gilroy talking about episodes 10 through 12 of Andor Season 1. And we're starting off with Jeff Goldsmith and his podcast Q&A.
Yeah, Q&A is a good one. I think you get a more relaxed Tony Gilroy because it feels more like he's talking shop with a peer. And so the information just kind of flows out of him with these Jeff Goldsmith interviews. I think these two guys might have a longer history working with each other or just these one-on-ones, whatever the case may be. I don't know much about Jeff. I know he's a writer. And so Tony probably, considers him to be more of an industry peer than your typical interviewees from nerd websites or Entertainment Tonight or places like that. So he's talking to Jeff, and he talks about Andor's prison sentence and sort of the irony around all of that.
He's only sentenced to 6 years because of Aldani. So he kind of makes his own sentence in an odd way. He suffers by something that he did. And when he's in the prison, he's building something. He'll never know what it is, but he's building the thing that's going to kill him. There may be other things along the way where without pixie dust or anything magical or ordinary, he happens to have some element of destiny to his path. Over-authoritarianism is one of the benchmarks of the last 6,000 years of human history, man. People have been executed for shoplifting for a long time. People are burned for being witches, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, not exactly our finest hour as human beings. But yes, of course.
Yeah, right.
It's a tale as old as time.
He throws down a few things there, notably at the end there where he sort of provides you with some historical reference to the rather random and harsh way Cassian was imprisoned. But he also says in there very clearly at the beginning, there's all this irony surrounding him. It's because of the Aldani heist that his sentence was made harsher. And he's in there building the weapon that's eventually going to kill him. So that's there's destiny surrounding him. And he's very clear. He says, this is his way of saying, not like the destiny that surrounds Luke Skywalker, if you're going to be thinking about it. Did I say the magic word?
I have no idea where that went. How that happened. Wow. Anyways.
Do I get a prize or something?
Sorry about that. Someone liked your point you were making.
But he's very clear. He says, without using pixie dust or anything like that, he has a destiny, and that's his way of saying it. I'm going to try saying the word destiny again to see if that horn goes off.
I think it was pixie dust. Anyway.
Oh, pixie dust. No, it didn't go off. All right.
Apologies.
So he has a destiny that isn't tied into like the Force and Luke Skywalker's destiny and that kind of thing. I think he's very clear about that pixie dust line. I was, again, the horn. He's got a freak now. Swike, are you trying to do like some sort of Pavlov's dog experiment with me to see if I react a certain way every time I hear a horn?
No, I promise you I'm not. I promise you I am not.
So, but he's trying to be very clear that, don't start speculating just because I use the word destiny about Cassian, that there's some Force connection or anything like that.
Well,
I think that's what he means by the pixie dust line.
Yes, of course. And again, that feeds some of the, I think, attitudes that we were talking about earlier in the show with that LA Times piece, is that you've got Tony Gilroy, who seemingly on the surface is running away from some of these Star Wars, what he might consider Star Wars tropes, the idea of destiny, the Force, all of that. And, if I had Tony Gilroy sitting here right now, I'd be like, whoa, hold on a second. Let's talk about this destiny. What's your hang up with destiny? Why do you think that has to be? Why is that fairy dust? Or pixie dust or whatever? I don't think that you have to necessarily conflate destiny with sorcery or magic or faith or religion or anything.
No, of course not. Of course not. But I think he's just recognizing that within the context of Star Wars, when you start talking that way, people have heard that before in the past. And it's usually the Force guiding your destiny, correct? So I think he just says that to be very clear that there's no mystical powers controlling what's happening to Cassian. It's just bad luck is what it is, really, if you want the honest to God truth. Cassian's got a black cloud hanging over him, and whatever he touches turns to what Sergeant Hosk said in episode 4 of Andor. It turns to that. Right. And so I don't know what, it's just born under a bad sign or what Cassian's problem is, but it isn't a connection to the Force that is bringing.
But that's Gilroy's take on it. That doesn't have to necessarily be your take or my take. You know, Han Solo's not a Force user, but was it destiny that put him in the cantina that day when Luke and Ben stumbled in? I would say, as a fan, I would say yes, it was destiny.
Yeah, I mean, it's the mystical power field connects all living things,
right?
But all living things don't connect to the Force. You know what I mean? Like connect in a way that you can use it.
Right. It's right.
There,
not everyone
it's
can
everywhere.
harness it. Right.
It's
not
everywhere.
everyone can utilize it.
And as they say, it works in mysterious ways. And, you know, I even think in some takes on the original Star Wars, whether it be in the novelization, whether it be in the radio drama, I'm not really sure. But I think Ben Kenobi even says something about the Force guiding them to Han and Chewie at some point. I think that comes up maybe in the radio drama. I can't remember. But it's just like he alludes to that or something.
Yeah.
There's some inference made that it was destiny for Han and Chewie to meet up with Luke and Ben. And if that's the case, then Ben would probably say, well, that's the Force working in mysterious ways.
Yeah, I would say so. I think you're absolutely right. On the surface, what Gilroy is doing is he doesn't want to be misunderstood. So he's going out of his way to say, this is not what I'm talking about. So I don't want any speculation that Andor is Force sensitive or any of that, because some people have a very kind of myopic way of looking at this stuff. And I can accept the fact that the Force is at play and it is bringing things together for a purpose, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, as you say, that these characters, that these individuals can utilize the Force and wield it, but the Force can wield them.
Yes.
That's the idea.
Yes. Connects all living things.
Right.
So, that's interesting. I really, really liked the prison arc. I think that's my favorite stuff in Andor season 1 is the prison stuff. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And Kino Loy and all that. That was just great stuff.
It was great.
Another big highlight, though, was Luthen going to visit Saw Guerrera. Good old Saw. He's always on the edge. He's very edgy, Saw, you know. He's, you think drunk uncle says the wrong things at Thanksgiving dinner. You should sit down with Saw Guerrera and hear what comes out of his mouth. You know, so could you imagine saying to Saw Guerrera before Thanksgiving dinner, please, Saw, no politics at the table, please. What? You ox? Okay. Stupid. And slow. But here's Tony just briefly talking about Saw Guerrera and dropping a little clue about Saw's future.
Saw is a volatile, impulsive character. He's super wise and super smart. And he's a gas to write for him. We have some really cool things. I love writing for him, and Bo has a really cool thing coming up for him.
I like that he uses the word gas, like it's a good time. It's a gas, baby.
But I just like that little bit at the end where he says, Bo has something to come up for him. Bo Wilmington. What's his name? Williman. Bo
Yeah,
Williman.
Bo Williman.
Bo Williman has something coming up for him. And Bo was a writer on season 1 of Andor. He's going to be back for season 2. He's a guy that Gilroy gushes over in a lot of these interviews, somebody he obviously likes working with. And so Bo has something planned for Saw. He has something coming up for him in season 2. So can't wait for that. That's going to be exciting. Here's a big one. And something that was talked about a lot on the after show following that encounter, that visit with Luthen going to see Saw in the caves the second time. And one of Saw's goons pats down Luthen. He pulls out that shaft.
Right.
And we're looking at it going, what is that shaft? And people are thinking, oh, it's a lightsaber. It's a lightsaber. And that's when a lot of the Luthen as a Jedi talk started to emerge. And I noticed in the descriptive audio track, they refer to that thing as a compact staff. So here is Tony Gilroy responding to the notion that Luthen could possibly be carrying around a lightsaber.
I'm deeply involved in all the weaponry and the sophistication of the Fondor, everything that it does. We built all that stuff up. The gallery, his secret life, the fractal radio, the slap charges, his comm systems, his change of wardrobe, all of those things. I'm right up in every single thing of that to a granular level. He needs to have a fucking staff. He needs to have a weapon. So I go to the props department and we pick one. I don't want to shut down any avenues, but you have to ask yourself, what do you think I'm interested in? So most people in the galaxy have ever seen a lightsaber, know what it is. I don't think anybody, I think most of the beings in the galaxy don't know what the Force is. It's not that was one of the early conversations that we had with Lucasfilm. And when you ask that demographic question, it's astonishing. Most people have never, all the amount of time that's been spent in the other films, fantastic as they're dealing with that subject, but it is not a widely known concept.
Okay, so he's basically saying, if you know me, it's not a lightsaber, then you would know it's not a lightsaber.
Right.
And he goes to great lengths to say, look, I'm up in every aspect of this character. I know what his comm system looks like, everything about his ship. I'm looking over all of that. And no, it's not a lightsaber. And he does say, I don't want to shut down, the speculation. He doesn't want to be a killjoy, but he's not going to entertain these ideas. And it's a lightsaber. He doesn't want that to be out there and percolating. The thing that where is it said? He says we have these initial conversations with Lucasfilm that the Force and what a lightsaber is, what it looks like, is not something that's out there. It's not something that yes, people in the galaxy know. And it's like, okay, well, who are you talking to exactly? Because all I know is that this kid Anakin Skywalker that was growing up on this planet that is furthest from the bright side, or the center of the universe, gets a glimpse of a laser sword hanging off the belt of Qui-Gon Jinn. And he knows he's a Jedi, and he says, well, I saw your laser sword. So how does this kid know what a lightsaber is? But, most of the people in the galaxy have no idea.
Well, that's prequel era, right? I mean, if you want to be specific about it, that's prequel era. It's
not like it's 100 years ago.
Right. I've kind of struggled with this when it comes up in Star Wars, because it does. And then in the example you're bringing up is like so great to show that, hey, the common folk in the galaxy know this, 9-year-old slave boy on a sand planet, on a planet that has been described as the planet that is furthest from anything interesting happening in the universe.
Right.
Somehow this kid knows what a laser sword is. He doesn't know it. Its technical term is lightsaber, but he still recognizes it. He can recognize it when he sees it, and it's not even ignited.
Right.
It's
just hanging off of his belt. Yeah.
Could be. You could say it's anything to the kid. Oh,
it's just
say, oh yeah, that's my vape. You can say anything. Don't vape, kids. Don't vape. It's not good for you. So that's interesting. So then you fast forward from that moment, okay?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that moment happens 32 years prior to the events of Star Wars A New Hope. All right? And the stuff in Andor is occurring 5 years prior to the events of A New Hope. So 32 minus 5, Jason, do you have a calculator?
Hold on.
Do you? Here, I got it. It's 27.
27.
So 27 years. So in the course of 27 years, you go from this little scamp living on a sand planet who could recognize a saber that's not even ignited. 27 years later, most people in the galaxy don't know what a lightsaber is. Can you think of anything in the world that people cannot remember from 27 years ago?
Well, I can, right? There are memes about this, Jim. You know, there's memes about our kids' generation, how they have no idea what an 8-track is. They have no idea what a cassette tape is. They have no idea what a Walkman is. They have no idea what a VHS tape is, So I guess there's some precedent for this sort of thing in our own culture. Generations are very quickly to forget things, but that's generally because the technology or whatever it is evolves to a point where you've got another version of it or something like that. But, something as unique as a weapon, a laser sword weapon, you would think that that's something that would sort of, stick out. We still recognize what swords are, even though we've moved on to nuclear bombs. We know what primitive or what we might consider to be primitive weaponry is. So I know this is a technicality. I don't want to bury us in this point, but Gilroy does say that after conversations with Lucasfilm, that this is where they, this is what they've concluded. And I'm just like, well, who are you talking to over there at Lucasfilm?
You know exactly who he's talking to.
I know who
he's story group.
Yeah, I know.
He's talking to the story group. The same people who guided Rian Johnson, his writing of the Last Jedi. His unencumbered development of that story. That's where that's coming from. And they play that up. They play that up in the sequel trilogy when Rey's like, Luke Skywalker, I thought he was just a myth. It's like, okay, well, I could see that. You're a scavenger who lives alone on another one of those sand planets. I get it. I get why maybe you wouldn't know. And also I assume that years of the oppression of the Empire has suffocated any historical records of a Jedi, any artwork of a Jedi has been destroyed, any videos, any holograms, and people who talk about the Jedi, they disappear in the middle of the night. You don't even see them anymore. So
that's a good point. You can cleanse. You can definitely get rid of sort of these traditions and things with a totalitarian regime like the Empire. Yeah, it can be done. It can be done.
But I think with this quote from Tony Gilroy, he's really slamming the door shut on the idea of Luthen being a Jedi. That's just not in the cards.
No.
It's just not in the cards. The Force is not in the cards for this show. It's just not. And I just find it interesting that Gilroy says, I'm involved in all aspects of this character, Luthen. Everything from the ship he flies to the clothes he wears to his gallery. It's like, whoa, okay, let's talk about the gallery for a minute. There certainly are Jedi artifacts in that place. Right. I see a couple of holograms. I see a Jedi Temple guard mask. And this is just in some shop open to the public in the biggest city in the universe. I mean, so aren't people going to ask questions? Well, what's this? Oh, that's a Jedi Temple guard mask. I think if Gilroy knew, if he really was on top of everything going on with Luthen and in his shop, then he would have stepped in when the prop people are putting holograms and holocrons,
Yeah,
and,
right.
Jedi Temple guard masks. Those things wouldn't be on display if Gilroy knew what was going on.
Well, if he knew what those things
this is
were.
an inconsistency here. There's an inconsistency here.
Yeah.
And if he knew what they were, would he balk? We should get that thing out of there. You can't have Jedi holocrons. What is this? It's a Jedi what? Holocron.
Nothing.
This can't be
no
here.
Jedi stuff. None of that.
So if he's that intimately involved in every decision surrounding Luthen, then he needs to tighten those reins just a little bit. Just a little bit. But I think, bottom line, Luthen is not a Jedi. He's not a Jedi in exile. He's not a survivor of Order 66. He's not connected to the Force. He has no Force powers. As a matter of fact, something I've learned is a lot of people talk about Luthen's ship, right? And how it has those two rays that shoot out the side.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, that's like Darth Maul's lightsaber. He's like wielding this starship lightsaber. That's awesome. But does that make him connected to the Force somehow? And what Gilroy explains is that all of those decisions were left up to the special effects wizards. On page, it just says Luthen does something spectacular to escape or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's left to the special effects wizards to interpret that, and they come up with something spectacular. End of story. So there's no thought going into, from Gilroy, there's no thought going into exactly all the aspects of Luthen's ship either, because that was a surprise to him. That's something that the special effects guys turned in.
Right.
As the spectacular move he does to escape and break out of that tractor beam and all that. So these are all left open to interpretation by us as we just see them as visual cues to spark conversation or draw a connection to the past or an Easter egg or what have you. All that stuff goes right by Gilroy. He doesn't even participate in that stuff. He signs off on it, but he doesn't create it. He doesn't come up with the idea of Luthen's ship having dual beams that shoot out the sides. That all comes from special effects.
Right.
He doesn't place the items in Luthen's shop. That's all up to the prop masters. And they throw in little winks and nods at the old school fans. But if we start looking at that stuff and putting it into context, then we can say, well, it's obvious that the normal people in the galaxy still know what the Jedi is. This guy's selling their crap. He's trying to lay low and be off the radar,
right.
Luthen.
Right.
The shop is a front for him. And so he's placing Jedi artifacts in there? Wouldn't that draw attention from Inquisitors and who knows who else? So some things just don't always add up when you start really breaking it all down. But that's okay. This is all just kind of, I don't want to be petty about this, but...
Right, of course. But
I also might want to have a sit down with Tony Gilroy and just explain a few things to him. Hey, man, you probably don't have the reins on this as tight as you think that you do.
Right. Somebody's still, right, having a little bit more.
He could never know this because he's not a Star Wars fan.
Right.
And puts no priority in becoming one.
No, he could very easily say to the set decorator, hey, I don't want any of your Jedi stuff in here. I don't want anything that's going to allude to the Jedi or the Force or any of that. None of that. This has all got to be just archaeological. This has all got to be, sans Force, sans Jedi.
Mm-hmm. He even has stuff from The Force Unleashed in there. Somebody will show up and go, hey, man, it's like, what's up with your gallery, Luthen? You have Jedi and Sith stuff in here, and you have non-canon Sith stuff in here. You got all kinds of... You're like, non-canon? What are you talking about? Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But, okay, so whatever. That's a really interesting clip from Tony.
Yeah.
Where he's so confident about how he's involved in every single tiny to the most minute little detail about everything around Luthen. And it's like, no, there's cracks in this armor, Tony. There's cracks in the armor. And I'm not talking about the Star Killer armor. Marva's hologram. Everybody talks about Marva's hologram. We know how it could have ended.
The Empire.
But thankfully it didn't, because we are actually talking about the message that she was communicating to all the people of Ferrix. And Gilroy talks a little bit about Marva's hologram.
You know, on Rogue, I won't go in deep, but like the whole Mads Mikkelsen hologram was a really interesting thing to do and build. The emotional potency of that was really, I mean, that was the most emotionally powerful thing in the really, really cool to build and design and do all this stuff. So the power of the hologram for emotion was probably already in my craw, but I had that idea early. Oh man, she could do her own eulogy. What a thing that would be on Ferrix. And what if that was a tradition? What if it was a tradition? And what if she'd been doing that since she was, my God, the first time she saw somebody do this, she was 6 years old. And wow, what a cool speech. And what could that be like?
So it wasn't necessarily unique, to Marva. It was something that was part of the culture that you recorded this sort of, exactly what he says and what we called it, which is your sort of your own eulogy. But she knew it was coming. She knew she was dying, and she was in so many ways inspired by what happened on Eldani. Didn't live to know that it was her adopted son that was, so pivotal in that. But it's a tremendous scene. It's a tremendous sequence, and it's sort of the final in sort of this trilogy, I guess we could say, of incredible monologues that show up in this series. Luthen's being the first. And then we have the second one being, I just lost it. The second one is...
the first monologue was delivered by, just prior to Luthen doing his big speech. You have, the person who makes the monologue.
Oh, I'm so glad I'm not the only one. I love it. Are you talking about the manifesto?
I don't even know. Remember, there are like three super notable monologues. There were two in that one episode. One was Luthen, and one was prior to that. That was someone else.
I thought it was Luthen, then someone else, and then...
Oh, Kino Loy!
Kino Loy, yes!
When he is on the loudspeaker addressing
You're
the
right.
prisoners.
Kino
He makes
Loy.
that speech, yes.
Yes. Rise up. Rise up. Yes, Kino Loy. It was Kino Loy, then Luthen, and then Marva.
Thank you, everyone. This brain fart brought to you by our friends at Raycon. So Marva's hologram. Also, very interesting to hear Gilroy was he was like inspired by some of his previous work in Star Wars. Mads Mikkelsen's hologram, which Urso, to his daughter Jen Urso.
Yep.
And he was
Galen
using that hologram to deliver a very impactful, emotional message. And Gilroy liked that device. He's like, that's a good thing to use. I'm going to use it again. So he puts that in his back pocket, uses it here on Andor. And also, I just find it really interesting to get these insights from Tony Gilroy, because it really helps you break down Rogue One and understand what his specific contributions are to that film. Mm-hmm. We know that, like, the last part of it all on Scarif was really redone. And that's what I thought the priority was for Tony. But you hear about these other things, like Melshi being involved in breaking out Lyanna Halleck from prison, as she was being transported to prison, and bringing her to the Rebel Alliance. That was Gilroy. He's mentioned that before. Mm-hmm. Anything with Melshi is Gilroy. Melshi was brought in with Gilroy,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the hologram from Galen Erso, Gilroy.
Yeah.
So the more we learn,
and giving each character in the ensemble their own moment in their death, that was Gilroy, versus having them all blown up in the ship at once.
Yes, right. And then, or even having them all survive.
Which was another possibility, yeah.
boy, oh boy, would a tell all about this just be the cat's meow if they could just release that. I would love it. Just to get a breakdown of what could have been with Rogue One. Not saying that, anyone should think the final product wasn't spectacular, because it was. But
sure.
But just out of curiosity, just as somebody who really loves all the behind-the-scenes stories of Star Wars and how it gets made and all that, I would just love to know. But maybe someday.
What might have been.
What might have been. So the big moment in the season finale, tons of big moments. What am I talking about? But the moment that the entire first season was building towards happens in the very last moments of the season finale when Andor confronts Luthen.
Oh, yeah.
Kill me or take me in.
Right.
And so Gilroy breaks that down a little bit. And he does talk about, like, is Andor just saying, like, some people were saying, oh, he's just doing this because everyone's hunting him and this is a safe place for him to go. He's just doing it out of self-preservation and stuff. But I think Gilroy makes it pretty clear that this is the moment, where Andor is, everything's come to a head with him, and he has evolved into being someone who wants to commit to fight the good fight.
Yeah,
So
he's crossing the threshold here.
Yes.
He's not living his real life. He's outside of himself. He's in dissonance with himself when we meet him, and he's not home with himself. All this stuff about exile and exile from Kenari and exile from, he's exiled from himself. He's not right with himself. That's part of it. I think he's exhausted. I think the audience is exhausted by that point. I don't think the audience has any appetite anymore for any more questions. And I think he really means it. I think his mother's gone, Ferrix is gone. The people that he cared about got away to the best he could do it. And he's been through all this shit, and Luthen's going to keep hunting him, and people are going to keep hunting him, and the Empire's going to keep hunting him. Then they're just going to kill him anyway. So, man, I think he's legit, man. I think he's ready. I think he's ready to roll at that point. I mean, I really do think it. Just put a bullet in my head or make use of me. I really think he's being legit there.
Yeah. And it comes across. And I like that Tony's talking about, how there's sort of symmetry between the mental state of our hero and the mental state of the audience too. We're done. We're done with all the hiding, the running, all of that. Let's just, all right, commit. What more do you need to see before you finally make the, your final commitment here? Put a ring on it with this guy. All right.
Right. And it's not done in such a cheesy way where it's like Luthen then like pulls out some sort of officer's badge and pins it on Cassian.
No,
you are now a rebel.
There's no
Welcome
ceremony
to the Rebel
here.
Alliance. It's very real, for as real as Star Wars can be. So that's it with Tony Gilroy talking to Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith. I have one more clip from Entertainment Weekly. This is Gilroy telling us what will be addressed in Andor Season 2.
We're going to juggle 4 years in the second half. And the food we'll be consuming on that, I guess, is that he has to become a leader. And what does that mean? He has to negotiate his way through the Luthen Rail experience and the benefits and disasters that means and that relationship. But what's happening on a large scale is that canonically, we're going to end up in Yavin. Our show's going to end up in Yavin, and he'll walk out and he'll be there to be the guy who gives his life. But that alliance in Yavin is an alliance of a pretty, are those the hardcore revolutionaries who really built everything, or are they all, or it's sort of it's a coalition government there that's already contentious. Well, what happens and what has happened to all the original gangsters and outliers and all the people who built this thing along the way? And how do you operate when your business is paranoia, how do you collaborate when paranoia and secrecy are your product? How do you scale up? How do you join forces? And how does the empire exploit those differences? And that is, what are the effects of time on these people? And then obviously within that, we're going to try to tell a ripping yarn. We're going to try to have all the relationships and all the love and all the betrayal and all the other stuff. He's committed. So now it's, what do you do with it?
Wow. I mean, there's, it's not as straightforward as you might think,
right. Yes.
It's complicated. And it makes you, when he talks about, well, these guys, the original gangsters, the OGs, what do you do with them? And I wonder if they're even capable of doing what needs to be done. And then it's the generation under them that is able to coalesce and become a real united force. Can Luthen and all the other Luthens and the Saw Guerreras come together? I don't know. It may be the Cassians and the others that have learned from those OGs that are the ones that have to or are finally able to sort of unite the rebellion. Is it even I guess the question is, are they even capable of doing it?
And then what of the opportunists that get involved as well,
Yeah.
Where they may have sort of sketchy priorities. That's bound to happen.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, whether they're former senators or ex-mercenaries or extreme warlords, at the end of the day, they're all outlaws, all of them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a level playing field. If they're all outlaws, then how do you organize? How do you organize a bunch of outlaws?
Yeah.
Well, Rebel Force Radio is one way. That's how me and Swank came together. But, that's at the core of it, too, is the rules are there ain't no rules.
Yeah.
And people will
when
be
they're all
looking to
rebels.
exploit that.
Yeah. How do you create order out of rebellion? That's really what it comes down to when they're fighting order. But they have to become, they obviously have to organize. They have to become, in some ways, that of which they are opposed to, because the chaos created by all these rebel cells, that's great. That gets you to a certain point. But as Tony says, how do they scale up from that? And that's going to be the big question.
And also, to a certain degree, the Empire has created a certain environment of law and order. So anything that these rebels are doing is anti-authoritarian to its core, despite the fact that they're looking to create some sort of utopian government or something like that. Or just go back to the old ways, which were flawed to begin with as well. So where do you take this whole show? And if the Empire has already leveled down such law and order throughout the galaxy, it's kind of harder. It's more difficult to shake things up, isn't it? It's more difficult for people to walk outside the path and shake things up and try to change things. So, yeah, these guys, they got a tall order, and this is a lot of stuff I never thought about when Leia and 3PO and General Dodano were hanging around that glowing circular table in the Yavin War Room. I thought it was all just, pretty clear cut. The Empire, they're the bad guys, and anybody with any sort of sense of logic or morality would push against it. It's not that easy. It really isn't. It's tough to be a rebel.
It's tough to be. We live it every week.
That's what they should have named Andor as a series. It's tough to be a rebel. I do think about the fact that maybe the title of the show turned people off too, because we've talked about how the ratings aren't. It's not a juggernaut like any of the other Star Wars series have been. Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, or Boba Fett. Those are all really big.
It's not a water cooler show. I can tell you because
I just think
I'm hanging around the water coolers.
People in.
No.
I don't think the title pulls people in. They should have called it like, Wind of Rebellion or something, you know. Just
Birth of a Rebellion or something like that.
Birth of a Rebellion, yeah.
But, you know, I don't think that they were, well, we'll talk about it a little bit later when we cover some comments from Bob Iger about subscribers and what their strategy is moving forward. But, yeah, it's this has been an odd play, you know, Jim, from day one, this series. We questioned it all the way back when it was announced that there was going to be a series around this character. And I'm super glad that they did it. And I can't wait to see season 2. I've enjoyed every minute of it. But it still is a head scratcher. It seems to be something that is really, I mean, you talk about fan service. This is something for the fans. This series seems to be really something for the fans. It's bigger than that in the sense that its scope allows it to appeal to people beyond just the the Star Wars fanatics. But at the same time, it's such an obscure character, it's such an obscure point in the Star Wars timeline. It's just, it's a head scratcher. It really is.
Still a great show. I mean, the quality of the show, outstanding. Everybody knows how we feel about that. But yeah, there's just, I think just a broader title than just calling it Andor. Remember when we used to call it Cassian? We used to call it the Cassian Show.
Right.
And then they announced, yes, it's going to be called Andor. Ooh,
yeah.
That's
you're way off with the Cassian thing. You're way off. It's called Andor.
But it's just because the series is more than just character specific, I think. Obviously, we're seeing this galactic oppression through the eyes of this specific character. And, everything that goes on in the show is connected to him and where he is.
Yeah.
But I just think that a broader title might have captured the imagination of more people who would want to, who would be like sucked in and intrigued by just the title alone. I don't think Andor does that. It doesn't intrigue anyone except for the most hardcore Rogue One fans. Let's face it.
Right.
It doesn't have the marquee value.
Certainly not. Certainly not. But wow, what a gem it really is.
Yeah.
So if you've opened yourself up to it or discovered it by accident, whatever is the case, you've really stumbled on something great, and it
Andor
should
Vision,
be celebrated.
they could have called it Andor Vision.
Andor Vision.
Andor in the Winter Soldier. No.
All right. Hey, speaking of which, let's talk about what was the event that happened earlier this week in Singapore. This is APAC. So this is the Disney Content Showcase. And there was some speculation about what we would see, what we wouldn't see. It was closed. It was nothing that you could watch on Disney Plus. This wasn't streaming anywhere. This was a closed media event. But from what we know, there were some things that were shown. The Mandalorian Season 3 got a trailer. And what we're being told is that Din Djarin is attempting to make amends for removing his helmet, and that Bo-Katan is really the antagonist of the season. So a lot of what was shown was what we've already seen, but what was shown here earlier this week makes it very clear that Bo-Katan is the antagonist. So, we may not see Moff Gideon very much. Last we saw Moff Gideon was being frog marched out in binders. He's going to be interrogated. So we'll see. He may only show up at the end. This is going to be a very Mando heavy season. I don't know that we're going to spend a lot of time with Luke Skywalker, with Ahsoka Tano. I think that some of that is going to be, or most of that is going to be put behind us, and this is really going to focus on bringing together, perhaps, or the struggle with these two factions of the Mandalorian culture.
Yeah, for sure. It was all set up with that dark saber. We know that Bo-Katan, she desires that. And she will probably make a move for that. As she also wants to, I think, reunite the Mandalorian people who've been spread all over the galaxy.
Yes.
All that stuff is kind of set up in Star Wars Rebels to a degree, so you know where her head's at. Din is reluctant to have the sword, but he also, it seems like he wants to repent for his terrible sin of removing his helmet. So the Darksaber might be the key to his redemption. What with the power it has amongst Mandalorian people.
Well, we certainly know what the Bo-Katan wing of the Mandalorian culture thinks of, the foundlings and Mando's side of things. We don't really know if memory serves. We don't hear someone like the Armorer casting judgment or what her view of sort of the Bo-Katan side of things is.
Right. She probably thinks they're blasphemers.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. There's a fundamentalist vibe with the Armorer's wing, the Foundlings wing, the Mando's wing of things.
Now, Moff Gideon, I heard, is going to be in season 3, and he's going to have a different look.
Oh.
I don't know if that means like some headwear, like a helmet or a mask or something.
Interesting.
Something to kind of, so he might have some new look.
Yeah.
He's too good of a character.
Oh, no, I think we'll see him. I just don't think he's going to feature as prominently as he has in the past. I think they're going to move away from a lot of that, and they're going to focus most of season 3 on this Mando plot.
Maybe save Moff Gideon for the movie,
right?
The Mando movie, which will inevitably be made, and I'm shocked it's not in production right now. Oh, I heard there's a rumor that things are pushing forward in production for a Star Wars film to go in front of the cameras next spring.
Yes, sets being constructed over in at Pinewood, right?
But nobody knows whose movie it is. I mean,
Right.
I think it's a toss-up between Taika Waititi's and Damon Lindelof's. Probably
Sounds like Lindelof's is the further ahead. Yeah.
It seems like that one has more mojo right now. It seems like that one has more energy surrounding it. Everything that has been sort of spilt about Taika's thing is that it's really that seems to be a very slow burning thing. And then people talk about the Thor movie, that they didn't like the Thor movie. So naturally, Taika Waititi now has no talent whatsoever. He can't direct.
He can't make
this
a
guy
Star
puts out
Wars.
a ton of This guy puts out a ton of really well-received content, but God forbid he makes one crappy superhero movie and his career is ruined. But, that could be a sign, too. I don't mean to diminish that. I haven't seen the Thor movie. I really
I haven't
care
seen it
about it.
No. I think it's on Disney Plus now. There are also rumors afoot that we will get a Christmas Day season 3 trailer. An official trailer for Mandalorian season 3 could drop on Christmas Day, December 25th.
And breaking news this week, The Mandalorian officially has a season 3 premiere date. The 3rd season of the Star Wars series will debut on March 1st on Disney Plus, March 1st. So you can look for the Rebel Force Radio Mandalorian After Show live to return on March 1st. That night, we will be talking about the season 3 premiere of The Mandalorian and taking your calls. And so that will rock us through the spring. And then here come AHSOKA. I think nothing official has been announced yet on AHSOKA.
I think AHSOKA will be showing up around May the 4th. I think that'll be the big May the 4th premiere, or whatever that date ends up being. Speaking of AHSOKA, there was no trailer for AHSOKA that was shown at the APAC event, but there were some stills. there were three production photos were shown. 2 images were of Ahsoka. The first showed Ahsoka standing in a cave or a tomb on top of a circular stone as light beamed down from above.
A circular stone, kind of like that seeing stone from
possibly the seeing stone.
Yeah, thing they put Baby Yoda on.
The second image was Ahsoka wielding her lightsabers. But the third image was of Sabine Wren, played by Natasha Liu Bordizzo.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. It's unclear from the reports that we're hearing whether or not it's the same image that was shown at D23, which was Sabine from behind looking at the mural from the series finale of Rebels. We don't know exactly, but Sabine Wren, as played by Natasha Liu Bordizzo, was seen at this event.
I believe the Ahsoka series, season 1, has wrapped shooting. Might have done so very recently, and the reason I think this is because when they started shooting, it was around, I'd say early September. I think Rosario Dawson was saying she was going in to shoot Ahsoka, and shooting would last a couple of months. So that would put it to late November.
Well,
or even
I also
mid-November,
happen to know that Rosario Dawson is in Columbus, Ohio this weekend for GalaxyCon. So she's not shooting Ahsoka right now. I can tell you that.
She's not in the stagecraft. She's in Ohio.
Huge event coming up. I'm hoping to get down there maybe on Sunday. No promises. It's just a couple-hour drive, but we got Matt Lanter's going to be there, and Ashley Eckstein, and as I say, Rosario Dawson. So it's a huge, huge show in Columbus. Another thing that was shown was Bad Batch season 2 trailer. Seems to be similar to what was previously shown, but a couple of new scenes, cameos from Palpatine, Commander Cody confirmed in this trailer, and a release date of January 4th.
Yes.
Seems to be confirmed.
All those things we knew.
Yes.
Palpatine, Cody, January 4th. So nothing new there. I did start my rewatch of Bad Batch season 1. And, I forgot how charming that little Omega is.
Oh, isn't she great?
It's just, they go to Felucia to see Cut LaQuaine in the second episode. And they land, and she walks off the ship, and she just suddenly drops to her knees. And she starts playing with the ground and stuff. And they're like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "What is this stuff?" And they're like, "That's dirt." It's like, "It's amazing." She'd never seen it before.
Never.
Gosh, that is so damn charming.
Yeah. She grew up on Camino. She doesn't know what dirt
exactly.
is.
She grew up in that sterile environment with the white hallways and never saw dirt, never saw grass, never really even was able to breathe fresh air. And here she is, and she just drops to her knees and starts throwing it around. It's amazing. As I went outside, I started rolling around in the dirt myself a little bit. I'm like, it's not that great. But, it's a little Omega.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It'll be great to check back in with the Bad Batch and Omega. I'm looking forward to that. Finally, the last new Star Wars thing that was shown was a sneak peek at Star Wars Visions Volume 2. And one thing that surprised me, Jim, is, they've got, of course, all of these great traditional anime techniques to tell these stories. But one that's going to be new this year is stop motion. So a stop motion technique for Star Wars Visions.
Wow.
So that ought to be pretty cool. I don't know what it's going to look like. Is it going to look like the old Rankin Bass Christmas specials or what? But so stop motion is going to be one of the the techniques for Star Wars.
Traditional anime and stop motion. So is the stop motion going to be in an anime style? Is Star Wars Visions branching out to different sorts of animation, or is it locked into the anime style? That's what I'm wondering. I think it is. I believe it's locked into the anime style. So if we see some sort of stop motion animation, I'm sure it'll be a stop motion anime.
I would assume so. I'd assume so. But I don't know enough about anime to know whether or not there's any kind of stop motion influence or history with that. I just don't know. One last thing. So there was no footage shown from the Acolyte. So that's actually in front of cameras right now, as a matter of fact. And there were some details that were revealed recently that it's really focusing on the origins of the Sith. And when I say Sith, I mean the Sith that we see. We'll see the seeds planted for the Sith takeover of the prequel era. So we'll see in the Acolyte where apparently, the idea for how to really take over and claim ultimate power of the universe, the origins of that whole plot will be laid out in the Acolyte.
Well, we know a few things, and this comes from George Lucas himself. We know that the Sith were many, but they couldn't exist because they were all evil. So naturally, they turned on each other.
Right.
And there was a big war that wiped out everyone, Sith and Jedi, a lot of Jedi too. And one guy, Darth Bane, he decided to restructure the Sith, take everything completely underground, and he devised the rule of two. That's where it all started, and that was 1,000 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. Now, the Acolyte, from what I understand, that happens in the High Republic era, which lands it around 100 to 150 years prior to the events of the prequels. So that plan would have already been in motion, and we would have been several Darths deep into this plan. So is that going to be the focus, is just the continuation of the plan, where we get to see some real solid threads connecting it to the eventual rise of Palpatine and the Sith taking over the universe?
It sounds to me like this is really where they figure it out. This is from the moment they figure it all out, and they put the plan in motion.
We got to get a guy in the Senate, and then we have to keep elevating his career until he becomes chancellor. That's the plan. So, yeah, about 150
Take over from within. That's really what it is.
Yeah. So we're dealing with guys like Darth Tenebrous, who was the master of Darth Plagueis.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this would be his era, kind of, at least the rise of Darth Tenebrous, if they want to stick with the old expanded universe, which we know is a slippery slope.
Well, we have to have Plagueis. That's for sure. We know we got to have him.
Have to have Plagueis.
Yeah.
Darth Tenebrous comes from the Darth Plagueis novel.
Right.
But Darth Bane comes directly from George Lucas. So there's not too much flexibility with Darth Bane as far as I'm concerned. That has to be part of the plan. He had to have set the plan in motion 1,000 years prior.
Right.
So when it gets to the era of the Acolyte, whoever the Darth is, let's just say it's Darth Tenebrous, he's got it figured out now. We got to get a guy and make him a senator. Well, who do we get? I don't know. I know this family on Naboo. Maybe we can, because that is where Palpatine is from, Naboo.
Right.
I think. I mean, we think that's where he's from, but he could have just been planted there because the Sith created opportunity for him. And that opportunity
it all
will
depends.
present itself.
Like you said, it all depends on how faithfully they would choose to follow the Plagueis novel. I mean, the Plagueis novel has Palpatine just growing up on Naboo, like
just growing up there,
anybody else, ends up killing his parents. He goes completely nuts.
They'd have to figure on Naboo somewhere in this plan because that's where Palpatine is.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's like they see like that's the best opportunity for him to begin his rise in power is in a situation that's kind of rocky to begin with. And what could it be? Maybe it could be the conflict between the Gungans and the Naboo. There was some conflict between the two of them, isn't there? There's definitely a prejudice the Naboo feel about the Gungans.
Yes.
But was there a conflict? Was there ever any sort of like real friction between the two of them outside of just like societal things? If it was like,
well, I mean, Jar Jar
was there a
says
civil
that's
war?
why you know Lycanus, Misa thinks. So he's saying that, you know, the Nubians don't like the Gungans.
But I was just wondering if there was ever a conflict between the surface dwellers and the Gungans.
Could have been.
That could be a clever story to tell. I mean, if you want to reintroduce the Gungans into.
Well, I think this is smart. You know, we know that the High Republic era has not been. It's not been a rousing success. You know, it has its fans. If you love it, great, enjoy it. Not taking that away from you, but it hasn't been this big multimedia extravaganza that has really captivated, you know, Star Wars fans across the generations. It hasn't. However, I think they're playing it smart. If the Acolyte is at the end of that High Republic era, it's really sticking the stake in the ground. It's claiming its own part of the timeline. Yes, if you want to know more about its origins, you can always dive deep into the High Republic era, but this is at the end of it. This is going to be the connective tissue between the end of that High Republic era and the prequel era. And as you say, Jim, there's 100, 150 years at play here. Could be very, 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 very rich with a lot of great stories to be told. I'm open-minded about it.
Prequel to the prequel. Sign me up. Yeah. But yeah, cover all the different eras. That's kind of cool. I mean, there had to have been a lot of work going on, a lot of legwork to get Palpatine eventually up into that chancellor's office.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plotting going on in there, and it wasn't all Palpatine doing it.
No.
He had help. He had help along the way. He was born into help, I think. A true Palpatine live-action origin story. That could be interesting.
I'd love that.
Season 2 of The Acolyte.
By the way, in that story we talked about earlier with the Deidre Miro actress Denise Goff, she has a little anecdote about after she had one of her initial meetings about starring in Andor, she was flying back home and she ran into Ian McDiarmid. Sounds like it sounds like at the airport or something like that, and she just took that as a sign. Allegedly, she said, "Hi, boss," when she saw him. Who are you again?
Who are you?
Wow. Oh, by the way, they topped things off at APAC with the Indiana Jones 5 trailer. So we're not an Indiana Jones podcast. It is the sort of the cousin to Star Wars. So I'll be looking forward to seeing the Man in the Hat back on the big screen, and also in Lucasfilm news, the Willow series debuted on Disney Plus this week. And Jim,
Did you watch it?
I have not watched it because I want to do a rewatch of the movie, and then I'll check it out. Have you watched any of it?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. And I'm going to watch without a rewatch of the original.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because I want to see if this thing stands up on its own two legs. I mean, the original movie came out in 1987. Box office bust. But, you know, through the popularity of Lucasfilm and everything, it's been able to keep its head above water.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think it's important that this series stands on its own.
It has to.
And
right.
Not be so bogged down to that movie from so long ago. So I'm going to go into it just fresh and not even consider the movie.
Not even consider the movie.
No, not until
That's just
maybe
crazy
after
talk.
maybe just to get into it, just to see if I can get into it. I mean, I've seen the movie. I know what the gist of it.
Mad Mods again.
He will not be in the movie.
No, he
series,
won't.
unfortunately. No Val Kilmer. For a variety of reasons.
Right.
Health, COVID, you name it. But I will take a look at Willow. It's not a priority for me. People were saying, when is the Willow after show?
Oh, my God, the Willow after show.
No.
Yeah, it's not happening.
See, the thing is that we do a Star Wars podcast because we have a lot to say about Star Wars. I don't really have anything to say about Willow.
No.
So
no, I don't.
just
I don't
say-
dislike Willow. In fact, I have
that's
great
not at all what I
memories
mean.
of that movie when it came out. Great memories of it.
Right.
And it's gonna be fun to revisit it. I'm also super happy for Warwick Davis, to be able to step back into that role. He's such a great guy, and that was a huge part of his life. And George was so taken by him on the set of Return of the Jedi that he said, "You know what? I'm gonna write something just for you," and that's where Willow came out of. And I saw a really fun photo of the cast of Willow there with Ron Howard. Now I don't know if Ron Howard has he had anything to do with the production of the Willow series? Is he serving as a producer or something?
I don't know.
Directed it or anything like that. I don't think.
No. I don't know where his name lands on any credit list or anything, but I do recall him saying that he had talked to Lucasfilm about the Willow series. They just keeping him in the loop. This is all emerging around the time of Solo when that was being shot. That's when Kasdan apparently approached Lucasfilm with a pitch to do a sequel. And he said, well, Ron Howard was saying that he and George Lucas had talked many times over the years about bringing back Willow, but they never did it. They never cared enough to do it. It was all just talk. But Kasdan, I guess, grew up a big fan of it and saw potential and understood the story. But maybe he came up with a great story. So
we'll find out.
George Lucas created these and built these worlds that really have a lot of potential for continuation. And Star Wars and Willow have many similarities in the way they're constructed and the characters that they incorporate. You could draw connections between many of the characters from Willow to those of Star Wars and notice consistencies in the way that George Lucas likes to tell those fantasy stories. So,
right.
Yeah, it's only natural to be a fan of Willow if you're a fan of Star Wars.
All right, we'll wrap up the news here just to talk properly about Bob Iger regaining control over Disney. He is now back as CEO. We did talk about it briefly on the last Andor after show as that news was breaking. But after the Thanksgiving holiday, Mr. Iger held a town hall with Disney employees, and there have been some varying reports from outlets like CNN and MSNBC talking about what he said at this town hall. And one of them is that the big focus is on creativity. This is allegedly a quote here. He says, "A number of you who worked with me know that I'm obsessed with creativity, but I'm obsessed with that for a reason. It is what drives the company." He also said, and this is, I think, one of the most relevant to us as Star Wars fans, he talked about how Disney's streamers need to focus less on, quote, chasing subs with aggressive marketing and aggressive spend on content. So, focus less on chasing these subs. He said we need to focus on profitability, and we will be taking a very, very hard look at the division's spending. Jim, one of the stories to break out of this is that the spending on content for Disney Plus is just off the chain. We're talking about billions of dollars that they are losing. Now, that's not a surprise to stockholders. They've been told that Disney Plus wouldn't really make a profit until 2024, but the stockholders are very nervous. We're here at the end of 2022. There doesn't seem to be any sign of turning the corner of profitability with Disney Plus. When Iger says that they're taking a very, very hard look at that division spending, and we were just talking about, the ACOLYTE, we've got AHSOKA, we've got more Mandalorian, we have, a lot of these projects that are yet yet to be seen. Do you think any of them are in jeopardy? Do you think anything could be on the chopping block for Star Wars as they're looking at, quote unquote, taking a very, very hard look at the spending? It's not unusual for some of these game day decisions to result in cancellation, pulling the plug. Might any of these things be in jeopardy, or do you think everything that's been announced so far in terms of Disney Plus is safe from Bob Iger's hatchet?
Wow. Wowie, wow. When Tony Gilroy first proposed the idea of what the Andor show should be, when he created that manifesto that he gave to Kathleen Kennedy after reviewing some of their initial scripts for the show, which he said read like K2 and Cassian on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid type adventures.
Yeah.
He said, it wasn't bad. It just wouldn't sustain itself, and it needed to have a richer quality to it. So he scribbled down all these ideas and stuff, and they're like, wow, that's really amazing. But we just can't afford to do this. But then they came back around to Tony Gilroy after a little time had passed, and Disney had opened up the purse books for streaming content. And they said, hey, guess what? We have the funds to make that Andor show of yours a reality now. Mm-hmm. So what do you say? You on board? He goes, yeah, man, let's do it. So because of the aggressive spending of Disney on Disney Plus, a show like Andor exists. But did Andor drive the subscriber numbers up?
Oh, apparently not.
Is it too much of an experiment to be spending all this money on that kind of stuff when you look at the Mandalorian, Boba Fett, and Kenobi pulled in huge numbers? And
huge numbers.
Probably drawed the subscribers.
That's exactly right. New subscribers coming into the fold. Andor hasn't done it. And as Iger's looking at this now, look, Andor is already in production. However, look at some of the decisions that have been made over at Warner in DC. The Batwoman film or the Batgirl film. Already made, nearly complete, axed, right? There was another one over there at Warner Brothers, and it's escaping me at the moment. But so it's not out of the realm of possibility that some of these things could be axed. I think that the profile on AHSOKA, on Andor Season 2, on more Adventures of the Mandalorian, I think the profile is so high that there's no way even Bob Iger could come in and, take the hatchet to it. I don't think anything that's already been announced is in jeopardy. Now, the feature films, that's a whole other story. Though, as we just talked about a few moments ago, sets being built this spring over at Pinewood for a Star Wars movie feature that's going to go in front of the cameras. This Iger thing, well, there's a few things. We've been talking to folks, our own contacts here at Rebel Force Radio, and there's two camps. There's a camp that still believes that Iger is there to facilitate the sale of Disney to Apple. There are other contacts that we have that are saying that's absolutely crazy. That's poppycock. There's no way. Now, Jim, you were telling me prior to starting the show that Iger specifically addressed this, and he had some interesting choice of words to answer this question about, is he really there just to oversee a sale of Disney to Apple?
Right. Yeah. This came up, I think, Monday. I guess he had some sort of town hall meeting or something. Bob did dismiss the idea that Apple could buy Disney, and he said it was pure speculation. and that he does not expect the company to make any significant acquisitions during his second term as CEO. So the days of acquiring studios, which is the Bob Iger hallmark.
Now, what's he talking about? Is he talking about Disney acquiring Apple or Apple acquiring Disney? Because there has been...
no. He dismissed the idea that Apple could buy Disney.
Okay.
Specifically.
Okay. Right.
And
So
also said that they're not going to be making any significant acquisitions. So
I see. So twofold. They're not buying anything, and no one is buying them, specifically Apple. But he did say that it was all speculation. So he didn't say there's wiggle room there. He said it's speculation.
He doesn't say that no one could buy Disney. He doesn't say that they're not talking to somebody.
Right.
But he said the idea that Apple could buy Disney is pure speculation. And this is from the Hollywood Reporter. So,
right.
That's where I'm getting that information from. Expect creativity. Don't expect any acquisitions. Don't expect Apple to buy Disney until all of this stuff actually happens.
Well, from people that we spoke to that have some proximity to these goings on. Again, there's a lot of rumors and whatnot. What we're able to glean from sources that we know, people that we trust, is that the bottom line with Bob Chapek was that the creatives were feeling very, very stifled. Chapek put in a layer of bureaucracy between the creatives and the distribution channels for the content. Put in this layer of bureaucracy that dictated where things were going to go. So it wasn't the creatives were out making movies, making content. And it was this layer of bureaucracy that was saying that's going to go on Disney Plus. That's going to get a limited theatrical release. Then it'll go to Disney Plus. So they were making these decisions without any consultation with those on the creative side. So the creatives didn't know what they were making this content for. Is this for a theatrical release? Is this for people to sit around at home and watch? And so it was that really seems to have riled up the creative forces at Disney that probably went to the board and said, we can't work with this guy. This guy is jeopardizing our relationships with talent. The Scarlett Johansson controversy with the Black Widow film comes to mind. He just was not managing those relationships well. And the creatives had no idea where their content was ever going to end up. And so that's why Bob Chapek was shown the door. Also, Bob Iger, it's a point that I've made on and offline is that, well, Bob Iger was still chairman of the board into 2021. So he may have resigned as CEO, but he was still chairman of the board, which means he was essentially Bob Chapek's boss for a period of time up until about 11 months ago. So how could this have gone, how could Chapek just run amok for so long? And what I'm being told is that Iger offered to help Chapek in the first couple of years of his tenure as CEO, and Chapek refused. He essentially, his ego got in the way. He didn't think there was anything for him to learn from the other Bob. And that was a costly mistake. But no tears for Bob Chapek, by the way. I think that guy got away with like a $20 million parachute. So, these CEOs, they fail up and they certainly land on their feet. No question about it. Bob Chapek is one of them.
Yeah. Meanwhile, people working in the parks and everything, they're struggling to make minimum wage. It's just...
But you can utterly fail at your job as a CEO and still walk away.
Make the company completely non-profitable, and they will give you $20 million to leave.
Right.
On top of your salary, which is probably still being... No, they probably... That was probably all part of the deal.
Right.
So, yeah.
Go away. Yeah, because they were just talking about extending his stay as CEO a couple of months ago, that he was going to be renewed.
Right, over the summer.
Right.
I mean, these people don't know the left from the right. They don't know up from down.
Yeah.
They don't know summer from fall. It's how could you not see the writing on the wall over the summer? He just failed over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm led to believe? I don't know. This whole thing seems fishy and puts a bad taste in my mouth. Listen, Iger, if you're going to do anything, get Lucasfilm back on track so they're not afraid to make movies, please. That's not why you acquired Lucasfilm, so that Lucasfilm would all of a sudden become afraid to make feature films. That is not why we bought Disney. And unfortunately, that's kind of the message I get from Lucasfilm, is that they are afraid to move forward with Star Wars feature films. So let's fix that. And however way you have to. Give Lucasfilm an enema for all I care. Flush it all out. All right, speaking of an enema and flushing you out, we got a new song from Puppet Lando.
All right, we do.
And we're going to, this is how we're going to wrap up the show this week.
All right.
With this world premiere, new song from Puppet Lando. This has been a year in the making.
A whole year?
A whole year. And this is an all-new song from Puppet Lando. It's called Hello, What Have We Here? That's right. Written and produced by Jeff Ulisny and performed with class and smooth style by our very own Puppet Lando himself. So we're going to play this tune for you, and then we're going to come back and say goodbye. I just want you guys to know, for lyrics and to download this song, visit rebelforceradio.com. We'll have a link up. If it's not up, it'll be up soon because we want to make this song available to the galaxy. Puppet Lando, Hello, What Have We Here?
I walked into the club, minding my business, having no idea you were near. I saw you at the bar, loveliest by far. Hello, what have we here? I took a walk in the park, just after dark, trying to help my head to get clear. I walked around the bend, there you were, my friend. Hello, what have we here? No matter the time of day, location, or the weather, it seems that the universe keeps trying to put us together. I've been around enough to know that we shouldn't fight it. We could be fire if we just took the time to light it. Light it up, boys. Well, maybe you'd like to join me for some refreshments. Everybody's invited, of course. You truly belong here with us among the clouds. Sometimes if you take too long, the world gives you a shove. And if we go on like this, people will say we're in love. I was lying in bed, resting my head, dreaming I was holding you near. Opened up my eyes, what a fine surprise. Hello. It works every time.
The amazing Puppet Lando with the world premiere of Hello, What Have We Here? Written and produced by Jeff Ulisny. And of course, performed by the one, the only Puppet Lando. Wow, incredible. What a holiday treat that was. And
like fruitcake. It's a holiday treat, like gooey fruitcake. Ugh.
Well, we will be back for more of that very thing here next week on Rebel Force Radio, so you will see you next time. In the meantime, if you like more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and why wouldn't you? Check us out over on Patreon. You can get the weekly full show video. So the show that you're listening to right now, you can actually see us. You can see Puppet Lando as he performs. You can see Jimmy Mack. You can see myself as we contemplate the week's Star Wars topics and all the discussion. Also, exclusive podcasts that you can't find anywhere else. RFR Q&A, the Babu Freaks, Clone Wars Declassified, Remastered, Filoni Files, Archive Highlights, so much more. All of that is over at Patreon. It really helps us out when you become a member of the Patreon group and all the supporters there. You can jump to the head of the line when we do our after shows, these live meetups on YouTube. If you are joining us there, you can jump to the head of the queue and make sure that your phone call is listened to and greeted by us here at Rebel Force Radio. You can join a community of the greatest Star Wars fans in the galaxy. Again, all those details at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Big thanks to our sponsors this week, MeUndies and Raycon. If you want to support us, you can support our sponsors. We appreciate that. Also, Rebel Force Radio on YouTube. Costs you nothing. Just show up. Go to Rebel Force Radio on YouTube, youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. It is a repository, a virtual archive of Rebel Force Radio content spanning the last 15 years, classic interviews, parodies, and bits, and the latest live stream after shows, like all of the Andor after shows, all of the Mandalorian after shows, Book of Boba Fett after shows, Kenobi after shows. They're all there. Also, the new full show audio. So please like and subscribe today. If you want to talk to us in between shows, you can send us an email, show@rebelforceradio.com, or drop us a voicemail, 708-320-1737. We're on all of the social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, so check us out there. But above all, the best way to help us out here at Rebel Force Radio is to subscribe and review Rebel Force Radio, the podcast. Love to have the subscriptions. Love to have your reviews. Just one rule, please.
Make them good.
And we're streaming 24/7 on outlets like Apple Podcasts, iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Audible, Pandora, Samsung. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you'll find us here at Rebel Force Radio, and you will indeed find us here next week. So we'll see you next time for Rebel Force Radio, Puppet Lando. I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.